coverage will be provided through the satellite channel of the Chamber of Deputies and direct broadcast on the web TV of the Chamber of Deputies in both languages, Italian and English. On our agenda, as part of the fact-finding survey with regard to the role of Italy in protecting human rights and against discrimination, the video hearing of activists for human rights in Uganda. On behalf of the members of the committee, I also wish to thank them. Thank also Robert Kyagulanyi Stampamu, internationally known as Bobi Wine, candidate at the recent presidential elections in Uganda. I'd like to remind you that a year ago, on the 14th of January 2021, the Ugandan electors went to the polls for presidential and parliament in a situation which was characterized by serious irregularities, and that on the 16th of January 2020, the Electoral Board proclaimed for the sixth time Yoweri Museveni as president, who has held the office for 35 years, declaring that 59% of Ugandan electors voted for him. This meant that Mr. Wine was defeated. He was the main opposition leader to whom 35% of the votes were attributed. However, the result of the elections is in doubt, first of all, because the electoral body did not comply with the correct procedure for vote counting. The 3 years prior to the elections were characterized by violence against opposition candidates, civil society organizations, civil rights defenders, electoral experts, and journalists who were systematically intimidated in carrying out their legitimate rights. In 2018, there were at least 100 deaths, including the driver of Mr. Wine. The increasing militarization of the election campaign became particularly visible on the 18th and 19th of November 2020, when the security forces repressed a demonstration of people who were asking for the liberation of Mr. Wine, presidential candidate, who was at that time detained. This led to the death of at least 54 demonstrators throughout the country, with hundreds of people arrested and others who security services arrested Bobi Wine, Patrick Oyomuriat, and Lieutenant General Henry Tumukunde, the main opposition candidates, impairing their campaign and restricting media coverage of the elections. The last house arrest took place on the day of elections, 15th of January 2021, which was continued till the end of the month, when, on a decision of the judiciary, he was released. To confirm the very devious electoral process, we need to point out that the Ugandan authorities did not allow the elections to be monitored by international missions of observers and election experts. The abuses of power carried out in the election took part in a situation of far-reaching violence with which the Ugandan authorities have in recent years ever more often targeted civil society organizations, and particularly those which deal with human rights and elections. Undersigning the very firm condemnation from the High Representative Borrell and the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in a resolution approved on the 11th of February 2021, the European Parliament has stressed the fundamental importance of free and fair elections in Uganda, criticizing the violence, continuing harassment, and the systematic repression against the leaders of the political opposition and human rights defenders. In the resolution, the Ugandan government is invited to cease its continuing resort to lethal and excessive force on the part of its security forces to cease arbitrary arrests and attacks against politicians and opposition supporters, as well as to immediately release unconditionally all the people arrested and held only because they participated in peaceful political gatherings, while repeating the commitment and the willingness of the EU to cooperate with Ugandan authorities in undertaking the very much required democratic reforms. The European Parliament invites the European Union to make use of the political weight provided by aid, development programs to strengthen defense and promotion of human rights in Uganda, exhorting the European Commission and the European Service for External Action to monitor the use of funds on the part of Ugandan authorities to avoid the risk that they used in ways which promote violations of human rights against the activists. On its side, the Italian government, answering a question which I put in writing on the 21st of December, it was reiterated that while recognizing the essential role of Uganda in combating international terrorism in the area straddling the Horn of Africa and the Great Lakes region, it intends to urge the Ugandan authorities to ensure greater scope for all political forces and to prevent and combat any form of political violence. Here, the statements provided by Mr. Wine to the Italian press. There was an interview with Repubblica on the 13th of January 2021 on the fact that the Ugandan opposition is inspired by Nelson Mandela and the principle of non-violence. So providing this contextual information before giving the floor to our eminent guest, we will be showing a video of 4.5 minutes in English in order to provide the best communication. And then with the support of the activist Nikos Schonderwert, the text in English will be read with simultaneous translation to Italian. So at this point, I think we can turn to the video. Thank you.
On January 14th, 2021, Uganda organized presidential elections. Museveni, whose rebel army comprised of child soldiers, came into power in 1986 after overthrowing the Obotetu government. He has announced himself as the winner in all 6 presidential elections held since. Why does he even hold elections? Uganda is one of the world's poorest countries and totally dependent on donor aid, with a dictator who has been convicted for corruption. To continue receiving donor funds, the donors insist that Uganda has elections, a request Museveni is quite happy to comply with, because he has the ultimate solution: hold zombie elections. However, in 2017, Museveni's worst fears were realized. A young, charismatic, and vocal musician contested and won a seat in parliament. The former singer, Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, spearheaded challenges to a number of acts and in 2020 founded the National Unity Platform, of which he announced his intention to run for president. His humble ghetto beginnings inspired a generation of voters, and he immediately became very popular. Museveni's only solution to the threat Bobi Wine presented was more violence and intimidation, and he's not secretive about his plan.
We shall crush those enemies.
His NRM party officials were instructed to stuff ballot boxes. Opposition leaders were thrown in jail.
We are not violent. I am a fully fledged judicial officer. I'm a magistrate. I only carry the voice of this one is not
eventually leading to the arrest of Bobi Wine, which made Ugandans furious as they took to the streets to demand his release.
Violently broken into the pop star politician's vehicle and taken him into custody. Wine, real name Robert Kyagulanyi, is standing against President Yoweri Museveni in a January presidential election.
Army trucks drove through Kampala, randomly killing Ugandans. Over the course of the 2 days, the 18th and 19th of November, over 100 unarmed Ugandans were killed. Right through the presidential campaigns, there were several attempts on Bobi Wine's life. On the election day, January 14th, 2021, opposition agents were beaten up, arrested, and tortured while NRM officials continued to stuff ballot boxes. A total internet shutdown was ordered, and on the 18th of January, the Electoral Commission released its results. But the numbers didn't add up. Ugandans protested the fraud, but they only have their bare hands to fight French tear gas grenades shot from Dutch-supplied SUVs. They have to face British and American-trained soldiers armed with Israeli weapons using munitions produced in Italy. Those who stand up for democracy are tortured in prisons funded by the EU. Museveni was yet again proclaimed the winner, but the violence against the opposition continued, and so-called drones started to arrest and abduct opposition members. 2 members of parliament were picked up and thrown into jail on the basis of fake charges.
The pickup truck managed to cut off Menendez's vehicle right at the intersection before the express highway, where the Joint Anti-Terrorism Unit officers then disembarked and muscled Segerinya out of Menendez's vehicle and packed him into their drone. All the while, the officers cocked their guns and pointed them at journalists, screaming at them to go away.
10 International Right of Courage, Kakwenza Rukira Basaija, was arrested and tortured by the regime's special forces. Kakwenza was denied medical attention and legal assistance. How much longer will the world accept this injustice?
Bene,
Thank you. Now give the floor to Nico Schondeweert to speak to the explanation of the video. There will also be the text, which will be translated into Italian. Thank you.
Nico.
Buongiorno.
Good morning, Nico Schondeweert.
Buongiorno, Camera dei Deputati. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Chamber of Deputies.
Può lei adesso la traduzione del testo?
Can you now translate the text of the video which we just seen?
Yes, a quick summary of the video.
Right.
Exactly a year ago, Uganda had elections and Museveni was announced the winner for the 6th time. Uganda is a poor country dependent on donor aid. There's a lot of corruption, and even the dictator was convicted for corruption. Because the donors require Uganda to have elections, Museveni organizes zombie elections. This has become more difficult since Bobi Wine won a seat in parliament and founded the National Unity Platform. Surveys showed he had 60% of the Ugandans supporting him. Museveni is open about his intentions to use violence and instructed his NRM party to stuff the ballot boxes. On 18 November 2020, Bobi Wine was arrested and people protested. More than 100 people were killed. On election day, the ballot boxes were stuffed with fake Museveni votes, and the numbers of the Electoral Commission didn't add up. Ugandans protested, but they have no chance against French tear gas grenades, Dutch SUVs, soldiers with Israeli guns, with Italian munition trained by the Americans and the British. After the elections, the violence continued and opposition members were picked up by so-called drones. 2 members of parliament and writer Kakwenza remain in prison and are badly tortured. How long will the world accept this injustice? Molto grazie.
Sì, grazie.
Yes, many thanks, Mr. Schondeweert, for having helped us in presenting the video. And I'd like to give the floor to Bobi Wine so that he can make his statement. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for having me. Kindly confirm if you can hear or see me.
Yes, we do. We do. Go ahead, Mr. Wine.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert, although I'm more popularly known by my stage name, Pupia, a former musician, social activist, actor, but also I'm the leader of the National Unity Platform, a liberal political party which believes in democracy, we believe in freedoms, we believe in upholding human rights, we believe in social justice. This is a political party that I lead, and like it was rightly put by Comrade Nico, on the 14th of January last year, Uganda went to elections, an election that was marred with the worst electoral violence that has ever been witnessed in Uganda. Just on the day of nomination, I was abducted myself and a few other comrades, beaten up, pepper sprayed, and then dumped in our homes, while other people were left to, were left for dead. That was just the beginning of the crudeness. It was the beginning of the irregularities. The entire campaign was marred with arrests, blocking of our campaign rallies. We were never allowed to address the population on radio or TV, and neither were we allowed. Note that on the 18th and 19th of November last year, more than 150 people were killed. I'm mentioning only the number that was picked up by our human rights desk, but it is believed that the deaths were much more than that, although the regime in Uganda only reported 54 deaths. On the day of election, I was put under house arrest, but even before the election day, on the 30th of November last year, my entire campaign team was rounded up on Kalangala Island and dropped into prison. Many of them had to stay in prison for more than 7 months, while others are still languishing in prisons. Many have not been brought to court, and the charges that have been preferred against them are bogus charges. On the day of election, the entire internet was blacked out in Uganda. Electricity was switched off. Radio stations were restricted from reporting the proceedings on the polling stations. And yes, General Museveni and his military had a field day. It is to see that there is constant disinformation by General, while he reported that only 54 people were massacred by his forces. It is much more people that are reported. And also the disinformation goes further because as we will note that the Italian representative reported that the elections were largely peaceful, which indeed was not the case, as people were intimidated, killed, and others were abducted, never to be seen again. It will be noted also that the European Union and the United States sent election observers, but they were not allowed, and therefore these elections were not observed by they were observed by neither the United States observers nor the European Union observers. And indeed, the European Union Parliament went ahead to protest the legality of the elections, asserting that the elections were fraudulent and were not free and fair. And so did the United States State Department. Allow me to assert on the issue of human rights. Human rights have been blatantly abused by General Museveni's forces under his direct supervision, where he has come out many times chest thumping and congratulating his soldiers for a job well done. Case in point is the November massacre, which General Museveni came out on national TV and congratulated his forces for a job well done. And indeed, General Museveni came out onto our national TV and mentioned that it was the SF Forces Command, an outfit of the military that is commanded by his own son. He owned it that it is the SFC soldiers that are abducting Ugandans, which abduction, I must mention, that is still ongoing. Journalists have been beaten, some have been killed, while one of them is still struggling to stabilize one, Ashraf Kaside, who was shot by a projectile by the government. Unfortunately, nobody has ever been brought to book. Now, talking about the November massacre, which was documented by the BBC, it is clear who shot the people. Even when but they were covered on TV and broadcasted on BBC, has ever been carried out, neither has the prosecution been carried out by these perpetrators of extrajudicial murder. It is therefore surprising that the Italian ambassador was seen to visit the SFC and apparently have dinner with them. Remember, the SFC is the most dreaded and most feared section of the military that is responsible for broad day killings, broad day murders. And it was commanded then by General Museveni's son called Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is a military general also. Friends in the Italian parliament, allow me to mention that the world knows that fascism is not new to you, that oppression is not new to you. Italy suffered a lot under a dictator called Benito Mussolini for 21 years. But Uganda has suffered under the brutal oppression of General Museveni for now 36 years. Uganda is a rich country, rich in natural resources, rich in human resources, but the people of Uganda are poor. I want to beseech you not to continue being seen as a partner in crime. We know Italy is a world-renowned democracy. So I want to invite you to realize that the idea that dictators bring more stability in Africa than democracy is wrong. The European Union does not need a dictator to further its interests in Africa. We can live well as Africans. We can relate well with the European Union when we are free, when we are feeling as human as other people. We want to be accorded the same standards of human rights like the rest of the world, because it is argued that cannot be accepted if it was another country, particularly if it was a European country where General Museveni, where a leader does this to the people, then that dictator will not last long. We recognize that there are other dictators around the world, but these dictators, many of them are dictating over their people because they are self-sufficient. But General Museveni is completely dependent on Western financial and military aid. We cannot remove the dictator with our bare hands because we cannot stop the Italian bullets. And we request that we would rather be receiving Gucci from Italy than bullets. We would rather see the Italian population relate with the people of Uganda as human beings with the same standards of human rights. I will also mention that we have been requesting and we continue to request that the Italian government and indeed the whole European Union, holds General Museveni accountable and make the respect for democracy, respect for human rights and the rule of law and social justice to make them preconditions for collaboration with Uganda. And where General Museveni is accountable, we request that the Italian parliament passes a resolution to stop cooperation with the regime, it is of any morality, of any respect for human rights. Like I mentioned, as I conclude, the people of Italy suffer so much under fascism. But I want you to look at us in the same situation as the people of Italy one time suffered. We know that General Museveni has been able to present himself as a clean, as a benevolent dictator, but the definition of fascism and all its elements are fitting within General Museveni. Yes, we know that General Museveni has blackmailed the West as the only anchor of stability here in the Great Lakes region. And indeed, as you know, dictators love to start up wars to justify their violence. Just like the Nazis and the fascists like to start wars, General Museveni is not short of that. And that's why, as we speak now, he has deployed the military in Congo, even without the sanction of parliament, completely illegal. And all this is not being called out by the European Union and the Italian parliament. So it is my humble request on behalf of the people of Uganda to request you, the Honorable Italian Parliament, not to continue to hobnob, not to continue to rub shoulders with the renowned dictator, or else it would be a disgrace of a democracy that is respected all over the world. I thank you and I send you greetings from Uganda.
Sì, grazie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wine, for this statement and also having made these specific requests. I'd now like to ask my colleagues whether they wish to take the floor. Oh, no. Before we ask for your comments, we have a statement from Masundi Lutize, a victim of the oppressive actions of the Kampala regime. So this will be presented in Ugandan with the simultaneous translation in Italian. So, Mr. Lucice, you have the floor.
Non so se...
I'm not sure whether we have the connection already. I can see Masundi connected. Masundi Lutice, can you take the floor?
Mr. Luzice, can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, please. Yes, take the floor.
My name is Masundi Lutice. On the 18th of November, 2021, there was a terrible disorders in Uganda. I think you heard of this. As I was going back to my house around 7 o'clock in the evening, I was stopped by a police patrol who asked me why I was wearing a red T-shirt which said People Power. Before I had time to answer, one of them shot me in the mouth. And I started running. After a few seconds, I heard another shot which hit me in the shoulder. And after this, I felt nothing more. I was helped by somebody who took me to a pharmacy, and there another police patrol came and picked me up. They were supposed to take me to the hospital. Instead, they took me around for almost 10 hours till 2 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, I found that I was surrounded by corpses. Now, if you just Imagine that, and I was helped by a doctor who came in, and I heard him. I raised my hand, and he pulled me out of that hellish situation.
Nzira kisa najja nankwata nanjolayola nantwala famasi eriraanye waawo. Dokita wa famasi n'angamba Luzige sige nasobola abasajja bakuyisiza bubi kankusibeko bandeegi yokka nkubire patrol endala essimu kubanga gavumenti ya Uganda yekoze bino bakutwale. Dokita nansibako bandeegi nakuba patrol endala netuuka ku ssaawa 2 ne banjolayola ne bankasuka mu kasimu patrol wansi ne bantwala banteekako ebigere ng'omusaayi guyiika. Ekyennaku bantuuse Mulago ku ssaawa 8 ogw'ekiro gwe baatwala ku ssaawa 2 ez'akawungeezi. Natuuka e Mulago ku ssaawa 8. Olwantuuse Mulago bantuusiza mu mokyale ne bankasuka eyo nga bamanyi ebyange bikomye. Bandi awo dokita yali muvubuka ng'ayitaayita ne mpanika omukono n'andaba najja n'ambuuza nga sisobola nakwogera olulimi luyiika wano ku kifuba nanfuluma omusaayi mungi. N'ambuuza ennamba z'amasimu z'abantu bange nenzimuwa. Abazira kisa bwe bajjira awo ne batandika okunzijanjaba. Mbeebaza nnyo.
Mr. Masudi, we have a problem with the audio. Just a second. Have you finished your speech? You have. Okay, thank you very much, because we couldn't get any translation, so I couldn't follow you. Now we will have the translation. From now on, your speech will be translated. Allora, cominciamo con la traduzione.
So can we start with the translation? My name is Masudi Luzige. On the 18th of November 2021, there was an uproar in Uganda. I think you heard of this. When I was going back home around 7 o'clock in the evening, I was stopped by a police patrol who then asked me why I was wearing a red People Power t-shirt. Before I had time to answer, one of them shot me in my mouth. So I started running. After a second, I heard another shot to my shoulder. And I heard nothing more. After that, I was helped by somebody who took me to the pharmacy, and from there, another police patrol came and picked me up. They were supposed to take me to the hospital, and instead they took me around for almost 10 hours till 2 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, I found I was surrounded by corpses. Just think. And I was helped by a doctor who came in, and when I heard him, I raised my hand and he pulled me out from that hell.
Bene, grazie.
Very well, thank you. Many thanks for this touching statement. Now I'd like to ask our colleagues if anybody wishes to take the floor. Quartapelle. I'd like to thank Bobby Wine and Mr. Litzige for the information they provided to our committee. And in particular, I'd like to express my great admiration for their bravery. For years with Ms. Boldrini, we've been following events in Uganda, and we're very much struck by the determination with which the opposition continues to stimulate citizens' participation in for a change of government in that country, receiving in return violence and physical attacks and in attacks against their safety, as we saw in particularly by what Matsudi Katsiga said. Speaking to this committee also has a symbolic value to express the support of the parliament for those who want a peaceful transition in Uganda. So I'd like to thank Bobby Wine in particular for the information he provided with regard to the position of our diplomatic representative, which will be checking with our foreign ministry. Italian ambassadors in the countries they are present in are instructed not to take a position, particularly in elections, and to maintain some congruence with the European positions. So what was referred by Bobby Wine is something which we'll have to scrutinize very closely, because we believe that the conduct of our ambassador has to be at the very least neutral and always on the side of free elections and the individual rights of citizens. So we'll be making informal and formal checks on this. There's another point I'd like to raise, because I'm a member of the Interparliamentary Organization for Human Rights. And in his statement, Bobby Wine was referring to the arrest against him and the torture, but also Segerinya and Sawanaya, two members of parliament who were arrested and mistreated. So I'd like to ask Bobby Wine whether he wants these cases to be reported to the Human Rights Committee of the Interparliamentary Union, which would interact directly with the Ugandan parliament to ensure that human rights are respected in all countries. This is a organization to protect human rights. And if the Ugandan opposition is not aware of this and has not made use of these mechanisms, this could be a useful mechanism to try to promote a democratic transition in Uganda. And if Bobby Wine is interested, we can provide some further information and support so that the Ugandan opposition can avail itself of these instruments. Thank you, Ms. Quartapelle. If there are no further requests for the floor from our colleagues, I also would like to express my support for the leader of the opposition, Bobby Wine, activists for human rights, and all those who are waging a battle for democracy and freedom of expression and for the protection of human rights. What we've been told is most definitely a situation which It's the opposite of what should be the situation in elections. Museveni, who's in power for, has been in power for 30 years, has used illiberal, anti-democratic and violent methods to keep his hold on power. And these methods certainly clash with international support. So we cannot think, as Bobby Wine was saying, that democracy can be sacrificed in order to maintain stability. This is a choice which doesn't pay, because dictatorship, repression does not lead to stability. And therefore, it is right that what's been told about military supplies also be investigated. We've been told that the Ugandan security forces also used bullets supplied by Italians. And so here we can also present a question in Parliament to have an explanation from our government. As Ms. Guardapelli was saying, we'll also be asking for explanations concerning the decisions of the Italian ambassador, because we cannot consider the violence as something acceptable. So we will follow up on this hearing, and we truly admire the bravery with which you, Bobby Wine, and the whole of civil society is waging this peaceful battle. I wish to repeat that, as you stressed, in line with the non-violent action of Nelson Mandela. And I also want to ask something about the situation of the LGBT community, which I suppose is very critical, because some activists have told me that this community is very distressed and is exposed to fierce repression on the part of the regime, which has often shown homophobia with regard to this group of people. So perhaps you could provide us with some information on this issue as well. Thank you.
Mr. Bob, are you there? Okay, I see you now. Have you heard my words?
Thank you. Kindly, I had them, but they were not in English. I really wish they could be translated for me in English.
Just a second, because I have duty to speak Italian in this committee, but I was, relying on a translator who is next to me here. Let me see, he can. Okay, I'm afraid that you haven't selected the right channel for the translation. So if you select on your mobile or, no, I don't know, computer, whatever you have, the language channel. Ma scusa, prima come faceva?
Well, I joined through the link that was provided to me.
Sorry? Yes, but why now you have a problem in the translation that you didn't have before?
Yes, now I can hear.
Now you can hear me, but you should hear the translator, because I can't speak English formally.
Oh,
You see, go to English.
I've gone to the, I've pressed the English button.
Testing the English translation.
Would ask the translator if he or she, I don't know, can repeat what we said here.
Can you hear the English translation? There was a question which was put to you about the LGBT community, saying that it's being harassed a lot, and the government is acting very fiercely with repression against it. Can you tell us about the situation of that community?
Thank you very much. I would say that there's overall disregard of human rights in Uganda by the rights of the majority and the minorities. They are all being crushed. And when we are fighting for human rights, we want to uphold and defend the rights of all the people in Uganda, regardless of the.
The other question, Mr. President, was whether you think it's a good idea if the human rights violations in Uganda should be reported to the Human Rights Commission of the European Parliament, if I understood the question correctly, of the first Deputado.
Thank you very much. Any platform, any institution that we can report the human rights violation, we report to. It is out of that desperation that we made this effort to reach out to the Human Rights Committee of the Italian Parliament, because we petitioned the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and we were told by the then chairperson of the Human Rights Commission that we would not be assisted. We were advised by the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission then that we should find a way of sitting down and talking with the human rights abusers, the soldiers, because they were above the law and they could not be apprehended. After he told us that, unfortunately, a few months later, he died unceremoniously. We petitioned the United Nations Human Rights Office in Kampala, and as I mentioned earlier on in my submission, the journalists that had come to cover myself and various other members of parliament who went to deliver that petition of the United Nations to the United Nations Human Rights Office in Kampala were beaten mercilessly. Journalists were clobbered, their heads were broken, and their limbs were broken. This was being done in full view of the cameras at the United Nations Human Rights Office in Kampala, being done to members of parliament and members of the media. So anywhere, any office, any platform, any institution that we can report the gross human rights abuses in Uganda will be our pleasure, and we will grab that opportunity and maximize it.
Ok, allora vogliamo ripetere?
So shall we repeat what we said previously, so that you can now follow with the translation. So, the quarta pelle. I want to express my admiration for the bravery of Bobi Wine and other activists. And I wanted to ask whether Bobi Wine, the NUP, had ever asked to be heard by the human rights of parliamentarians of the Interparliamentary Union, which is an organization which gathers all parliaments all over the world. And the Committee for Parliamentarians' Human Rights aims at promoting democratic participation, interacts with national parliaments in order to ensure that the rights of parliamentarians are guaranteed. Since when you spoke to us, you talked about the conditions of Sigirinya and Sawanya, members of parliament who are currently tortured and imprisoned. We think that this might be one of the international human rights instruments you could make use of. And we would certainly be willing to facilitate this contact if you're interested.
Thank you very much. We have been looking forward and indeed making efforts and requests to get that opportunity. We promised an opportunity much later in Brussels, but I must say we will make use of any opportunity. Our duty is to make sure that we raise these voices and highlight the plight of our people. So at any opportunity, we will be there and we will address our issues directly.
Molte grazie. Allora ci metteremo.
Many thanks. So we will contact you to provide you with all the details to undertake an initiative with this committee in the Interparliamentary Union. I'd like to bring this hearing to an end by saying that I greatly admire your determination to move ahead to give a democratic future to your country, Uganda, a country which for 5 years has been governed by the same person. I find it totally unacceptable to see the violence and the repression which has been enacted so as to prevent people from voting and expressing their will. I also find that your non-violent action inspired by Nelson Mandela is very admirable, and we were struck by the fact that our ambassador did not notice fully these actions and did not stigmatize the actions of the government there. And we will be presenting a question in Parliament also about the use of Italian manufactured bullets against demonstrators who were there peacefully to express their intentions to vote and be a part of the process of change. So thank you very much. We'll be following up this hearing with these commitments, and we will stay in contact in the future, because we also think that it's the duty of a country like ours to support battles for democracy in other countries. So congratulations, persevere, and we will try to be useful to you in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate, and on behalf of the people of Uganda, we send our thanks.
Okay, allora.
So we thank you again, and with this I adjourn this hearing.